May 2, 3064. Swartz Flats, Galatea City. Galatea, Lyran Alliance. Two packs of Grey Titans jousted along the lists formed by the Koto Canal, shaking the earth as they charged along its banks. The air rang with the thunder of galloping endosteel hooves on ferrocrete, and had the burned-out low-rises any windows still, they would have shattered in the storm. Instead, the facade shivered and wept, shedding pieces of soot-stained bricks. In better days, Cameron Park had swaddled the canal and its bridges in luscious jacarandas, the perfect cradle for a gentrified neighborhood. But as the Grey Slayers charged, the scorched lawns and dust bowl flower beds were less than an afterthought to be ground under their ash and black-stripped feet. Their mechs took less than a minute to sprint up the boulevards lining the canal, whipping past the smoke-stained ruins of the pastel-fronted apartments that had once been tourist attractions as much as luxury homes. Group W held their nerve, taking positions from their end of the parkland, anchored by the unmistakable beaked and bird-like shape of a marauder clad in digital urban camouflage they'd adopted for this campaign. Brilliant peach under the reflected sunset, the water of the canal flashed an electric cyan as its twin particle cannons discharged suppressing fire in 5-second clockwork ticks at the advancing horde. One of the slayers, a dervish, rose above the cobalt flames on jets of flame to fling a reply of long-range missiles from the boxy double launchers mounted like a harness on its chest. If they'd hoped to dislodge the marauder, they would have been disappointed. Explosions rippled along the marauder's narrow spine, cascading broken armor plates to the street, but it remained unmoved. Instead, the marauder rooted itself to its position and its mission, and was rewarded as it caught the Slayer's lead mech, a crest-helmeted Centurion, with first one particle beam, and then another. The shield-like armor plate above the Centurion's left shoulder cracked with St. Elmo's fire and exploded under the relativistic stream, and even as it flexed its arm into a boxer's block, the second blow caught it in the ribs. It doubled over like a gut-shot soldier, and in that second, the shadow of its new foe stepped out from a cross street. A Group W grasshopper, more man-shaped than insect, swung an armored fist back and delivered a powerful overhead hook to the Centurion's mauled shoulder, shattering the remaining plating and digging into the more fragile innards. The Centurion dropped to a knee under the blow, and the grasshopper squared up, no doubt intending to skewer its stricken enemy with a brace of lasers mounted throughout its torso. And it would have, had not a Slayer axeman skated up the canal on jump jets at full burn, barely above the steaming water's surface, and smashed its namesake hatchet into the grasshopper's thigh. Metal screamed and squealed, and the grasshopper's stance buckled as the sharpened slab of reinforced heavy steel cut deep. The ferrocrete pavement glowed molten as its lasers missed the fallen Centurion. Then, it was the grasshopper's turn to fear as the axeman hunched forward and fired the massive autocannon built into its broad shoulder, joined a moment later by the recovering Centurion adding its own barking cannon to the fight. The grasshopper stumbled, punch-drunk, and collapsed, arms akimbo, into the homes behind it. But all the while, the marauder was firing and firing, flaying armor from the onrushing Slayers. Across the canal, a Group W Star Slayer sighted the twin barrel of its heavy combat lasers into the melee and struck. Facing the fallen grasshopper, the axeman never registered the new attacker, even as the glittering blue beams converged on its thin rear armor and melted through. Their bite found purchase, and a gout of fire erupted from the axeman's back as the autocannon ammunition cooked off. The corrugated steel platform vibrated beneath you with the detonation. You felt it even 2 kilometers away, lying prone on the roof of the ruins of the Cypress Tower condominium. The explosion was bright enough to blind, and even though your binoculars automatically darkened, you still turned away, squeezing your eyes shut. When you looked back, the axeman was still standing, still fighting, as the grasshopper stood up and fired its lasers again, this time finding the wounded Centurion and savaging it further. A civilian might have been astounded by the axeman's resilience, but you knew better. The Axeman wasn't carrying a full load of ammunition, even with its advanced ammunition compartments and blowout magazine panels. That kind of brew-up this early in the fight should have torn the machine practically in half. You reckoned maybe a 20% ammunition load, maybe less. The shot that had laid out the Grasshopper was one of the pilot's last rounds. It explained the reckless abandon with which the Grey Slayers were rushing into close quarters. "Support fires," one of your companions whispered. You looked up in time to see a screaming flock of missiles arcing over Swartz Flats from the direction of Galliport. Dozens of long-range missiles in a spread that suggested no fewer than a full lance of indirect fire mechs, and among them, at least 2 archers or longbows. The hail of explosives fell upon the Slayers' formation like a murder of angry crows. Mechs slowed and huddled under the onslaught. The meager effort you'd seen earlier from the Dervish was pitiful by comparison. It told you everything you needed to know. Your supply raid to Galatea City was doomed. All the ammunition and supplies that had been stockpiled here for mercenary trade in the Galatea Games was gone, frittered away in this senseless conflict. There was no cash to recover and take back to a nest. It was just you, the gangs, and Group W sweeping through like a scythe at harvest. The Grasshopper made the point by standing as though all the punishment it had taken was a mere nuisance and kicking the gyro out of the broken Axeman's guts. The Marauder was still there, barely scratched, firing away. 1, 2, on the Dervish's legs. 1, 2, as the Centurion tried to stand again. And then another brutal wave of missiles came in, and another. Group W had ammo to share, but they didn't seem to trust you, and the gangs were desperate and untrustworthy. You shimmied back into cover, looking down into the abandoned shopping complex that was sheltering your machines. Your cockpit glinted up at you from the broken skylight of the food court. Gangs or Group W, you knew the only way out was through. But from your position, wounded and low on firepower, you knew you couldn't handle it alone.